Hey everybody, welcome back. In today's video, I want to have a look at Filecoin. Now, it's been a while since we have covered Filecoin, and if you watched that video, you might remember these charts looking pretty similar as they did in the previous video, and the reason for that is basically they've played out exactly how I predicted. And maybe not like, maybe it went up at 50 cent one day instead of me predicting 40 cent, I wouldn't have done that. Anyway, I'm basically saying that it's more or less followed the guideline or the expectations that I thought it would play out in. And we can see that in the previous video, we sort of focused very heavily on the Bitcoin halvings. Leading up to the Bitcoin halvings, what happened in Filecoin's previous cycle. And we compared that to the previous cycle, and we can see we have a lot of arrows. We have this blue range of sort of 200 days that I also compared. And we have these resistances and these supports that Filecoin sort of operated in. And in the previous video, we sort of deduced this range in multiple ways, which corroborated what we sort of predicted would happen. We had a lot of nice circumstantial evidence that came together quite nicely and painted a very nice picture or a potential picture that could happen. And so far, that picture is playing out, and it's basically that we would operate within this blue range with a move range of 150% from this low, this support of around $3 that we drew in. And we can see we pulled this multiple ways. I mean, I think I took this initial blue line from where we started to see a turnaround, and we deduced where to start this blue range sort of from where these arrows came in, which again has played out quite nicely. If we zoom in at the bottom here on this first halving that Filecoin went through, we can see that it sort of dips down into this deep value range that I sort of priced in at around from $2.60 to $2.30, sort of 30-cent range where I thought Filecoin is very unlikely to go much below. It's sort of one of the best times you can buy Filecoin, one of the best prices you can buy Filecoin at. And we can see it initially drops down, and we sort of, this arrow could be counted as these two dips. It's a bit loosey-goosey, but it was sort of a framework that I looked at, as well as with sort of a time frame period, sort of how far away we were from the halving. And we can see that we dip down below, and then once we climb back up, sort of the dip that we climb back up from, we get quite a big jump. So we go from an extreme low to an extreme high. And this more or less correlates the same, and these levels actually basically coincide perfectly. They come up to the same price range above $9, and then we can see after that Filecoin does return back to this deep value range, and you can actually see this arrow, this second arrow here, this low, actually points to the dip just above the deep value range, because here we don't quite go into the deep value range, or at least we didn't this cycle. And then a small difference that we saw, but still sort of the same, we see Filecoin rally up, but ultimately not go very far. It's still a lower high. You could argue this arrow should be here, because we have a little rally and a collapse back down. Here we have a little rally and a collapse back down. But also taking into account the time frame, I was expecting another rally to take place sort of before this 200-day mark. And we can see that's basically what this guy is. We sort of rally into this 200-day mark, and then from there on out, we just go sideways. Although what's interesting to see is that we do have a serious, well, not a serious correction. Well, we do have a serious correction. We basically go down from this high that we enter into, which is sort of playing out here. You could argue that this arrow points to this guy, or we could argue this arrow points to this guy, as these are more price related in terms of where they reached price wise, or you could say this arrow should point to here because of sort of time or range bounce. But again, it's sort of, I don't expect these things to play out the exact same way. When I put this arrow here to say that we'll have a rally up, that rally didn't have to go and stop where the previous rally was. It could have gone higher, it could have gone lower. For a time, it looked like it had gone lower. Again, I made my video back mid-November, I think it was. Let me check. So here, about after this rally, because of course this arrow is here, I would have probably said that this is most likely the top that we'll see. But for the rest of the time that we're in this blue range before the halving, we'll probably operate within it and wick both ends. We'll put in a top and we'll put in a bottom. We'll come back to this low, potentially. And again, if we've looked at other altcoins during sort of halving times, we see that there is a small bull run every 4 years, and there's a big bull run every 4 years. And there's a big bull run every 4 years. And this more or less coincides with the time that we might have a small bull run. We can see that some years during 2019 here, for example, mid-2019, we have an explosive price movement, and Filecoin went up 270% over the space of, a third of a year. Some people could consider that a very small bull run, and that's kind of the name that's put on it, even though I wouldn't really consider it a bull run. It's just a sort of a revival period in crypto where we have some good price action after a bear run, in my opinion. And then we are followed by that with pre-halving, sort of halving doubts and volatility and conflictions, which causes the price to basically plateau on a lot of altcoins. We will see Bitcoin just slowly trend up during this time, but for alts, it's most of the time, very often, a different story. And with Filecoin, that is what played out the first time and potentially could play out again this second time. We see that these highs here that we often reached during this blue zone last halving that Filecoin experienced often coincided with the previous wick before this blue arrow. Here you might want to say it's the previous wick afterwards, or this guy. Again, it'll be sort of one of those things that time will tell, but I will say we will probably very rarely wick to these tops and bottoms. I'd say we will probably operate within a range of 30% below and above. Excuse the crudeness of these arrows or these lines, they don't really mean much, but I would expect Filecoin to operate mainly within some sort of range like this during this time. But you might want to put buy orders in for below $3.60. You might want to put in sell orders above $6.50. I don't know, it's completely up to you, but it's just something to be aware of and what I think will happen. And again, I've been wrong in the past. If you're not worried about trading this and more worried about picking some up at a good price, I would sort of suggest any price below this initial pullback here, or above, or around. Like here we can see that this will be a very strong resistance, in my opinion, for Filecoin to break down below. And especially now, if we analyze what happened before, we see we did go back to this deep value zone. I don't think that's necessarily a thing that must happen. I think that's something that could happen, but I wouldn't expect or make a plan that depends on this happening. But we do see that Filecoin does trade in a volatile way during this time, but afterwards it just goes up in price after the halving. And Filecoin is actually quite unique in this way because Filecoin basically Filecoin goes very close to putting in its all-time high before the 2021 bull run, which is quite unusual for an altcoin to peak almost before the bull run year. So we could see something like this play out again. I think it's one of those coins like Chainlink and Litecoin and coins like XMR where they have sort of made their own patterns and they follow their own rules now instead of maybe a more dependent altcoin on Bitcoin. But again, something to keep in mind is that after this time, Filecoin has done well in the past, and we only have one case for this to sort of compare to, but I would put a bit of stock in this, to be honest with you. I would sort of presume to see Filecoin do well. I would expect it to follow a previous trend, to be honest with you, especially as we've seen it play out so similarly up to this point. Now again, anything can happen, but I would be more along this line here. You might have some nice buying options or some points coming up soon. Again, if you're sort of looking at this with a bearish eye like I might, you're maybe seeing poor price action. You might see this as just a retracement level to a previous high that we're going to bounce up from. Either could happen. Again, like if you want to really, you could go bullish on this and say, well, we've kind of followed this high up and each of these opens and closes have sort of held above this line so far. Even if we did wick below it, we are still currently above. Again, kind of what happens over the next few days will probably dictate what happens over the next few months before the halving. Again, halving priced in for the 24th of April. I haven't checked that in a little while, so it might have changed by a day or two, but ultimately still the same time period. We have about 4 months. And in 4 months, anything can happen in cryptocurrency. So again, just be aware. I, again, would expect Filecoin to pull back. We've sort of had a couple of months now of strong price movement all over the crypto space. And for me, it doesn't seem sustainable just because of the macro conditions that surround it. And every time sort of the crypto space, Filecoin, has had extraordinary price performance, it's because the macro conditions surrounding it provided the perfect option for these assets to explode in price. And right now, we're not just seeing that. I mean, rates are still high. Unemployment could jump. There's no money printing really going on. A lot of conflicts are also sort of happening around about now. And you could make a case for a spot Bitcoin ETF. The macro isn't right. The money in the system isn't there, for me personally at the moment. But again, I can always be wrong. If we take a look at Filecoin on its Bitcoin pair, we can see a bit of an updated chart. from what we saw in the last video, I did want to point out sort of these times that Filecoin spends in a downward trend on its Bitcoin pair. And we can see it has a very short-lived positive move on its Bitcoin pair, but of course does go quite parabolic when it does go up, and at its high it was worth 0.02 Bitcoin, which is actually kind of crazy if you think about it. Not many alts can rival that. I mean, I'm pretty sure Ethereum is at like 0.06 on its trading pair. So, you know, for a much lower altcoin, that's extremely impressive. These lines here, you can probably tell, these orange ones indicate the downward trend that Filecoin operates within during a certain period of time. And these lines here indicate the year or the part of the cycle Filecoin is in. And these gaps are exactly a year. They mark the 31st of December for each one for each respective year. And we can see this white line here first indicates 2017. And we can see if we jump ahead, 2018, the 31st of 2017. And if we jump ahead, we can see this marks the 31st of 2021. So again, the end of the bull run year, basically. We can see this next one, again a year above, end of 18, end of 2022, and now the new year that we've just put in, the end of 2023, which correlated to the end of December 2019. And if we do look at what happened within these years, we can see that it's basically the same thing. A general downward trend, you know, closing the year lower than where we were on its Bitcoin pair. Again, closing the year lower than where we were on the Bitcoin pair. But after the 2019 close into 2020, we can see Filecoin oscillates for a while leading up to the halving. And again, it was somewhere around this time here where the halving took place. And then Litecoin immediately explodes on its Bitcoin pair. And if we swap back to its US dollar pair, we can see that this is exactly what happens on its US dollar pair as well. Filecoin just goes crazy after the halving. And, you know, this shows on both. It takes a huge lead on Bitcoin and it takes a huge lead on its dollar pair. But again, this is short-lived, and we can see pretty much over the space of, after its initial explosion, it retraces back to exactly where it was in the space of, you know, less than 2/3 of a year. Just below 230 days, which is impressive and, you know, shocking at the same time. So it's not something that you might want to put a lot of stock in, but it might also be something that you say, well, it's spent so much time in this downward trend, it's likely that we'll see some sort of explosive movement that has no real momentum, but it just suddenly goes up and then suddenly comes back down. If you want to play that sort of game, that's totally up to you. And go for it. If you make money, good on you. But just remember that these things are dicey at best. You know, like, they might not happen. And if you go long on Filecoin with huge leverage and you just get a drop, which is possible. I mean, Filecoin has been trading down on its Bitcoin pair for 3 years. You could lose a lot of money. It's just something to be aware of. There's no guarantee that it will climb up again like it did in 2020. And we can see then, basically, for the bull run, Filecoin does take another lead, and for the first quarter of the year it does well, but then it does just go straight back down. So you have this window now of basically from where we are, you have about a year and a half, give or take, less really, a year and a third of good price action that could potentially take place now or over the next few days. And if we zoom in, we can see that Filecoin has actually broken out of this downward trend that was sort of held, it's a bit loose, but it does sort of indicate the highs and the lows. The support line is much more defined than the resistance, in my opinion. And we can see that if we zoom into the previous cycle as well, we can see this happens almost straight away as well. And slightly before it actually wicks above, and then a few months afterwards in March, we actually get some sort of a significant move up, and we're not trading downwards, we're trading sideways for a couple of months. So you could say up until the halving, Filecoin might trade sideways on its Bitcoin pair, and we see a similar picture on its US dollar pair where Filecoin trades sideways within this range. Again, Filecoin might trade sideways, it might rally up. It's a different environment. Bitcoin has a lot more eyes on it now that could correlate to good price action, it could correlate to bad price action. It's very difficult for me to say. And I wouldn't be able to tell you, anyway, nobody can tell you what will happen. People can only guess and be right and say, haha, I told you so. But there's no real way that they can 100% know, which is why I try not to trade these things. I just buy at prices I'm comfortable with. But whatever strategy works for you, works for you. And again, if you wanted to sort of compare where we are now, which is just, we'll say from this purple here if you were to long Filecoin from its sort of January 1st of 2020 and sell at the perfect time, you'd make a huge profit of 4,657% on its Bitcoin pair, and that's on an asset that's also appreciating on its US dollar value. So you'd make a lot of money. Again, there's no sort of way of knowing whether that will happen like it did back in 2020, but I would personally lean towards maybe, yeah, we get a bit of a relief rally on its Bitcoin pair. But again, there's a lot less hype around Filecoin now. That could be because we're in a bear market, and that might mean you're getting in early in a way. Or it might just mean that nobody is on it and there's no hype around it and it doesn't do anything. It's like double-edged sword, which way you want to look at it. So, you know, it'll either cut you bad or you'll, I don't know, make a lot of money. I'm hoping you make a lot of money, but just be careful with which way you look at it. I think that's more or less what I want to say. I'm trying to see if I've forgotten anything. Again, after these sort of halvings, we have extreme rallies and we do get close to this sub $30 range. From current prices, that would be around a 6x, which is good. But if we take a look at Filecoin of where it sort of exits the halving and where it puts in its high, it goes up about 4,000% as well. So if you sort of timed it perfectly with your Bitcoin pair and your USD pair, you could make serious money. You know, if you swapped out here at this point into BTC and then Filecoin's price appreciates against BTC, and at the same time BTC's in a bull run, you could do very well. But again, there's no chance, there's no guarantee that it will play out that same way. Just, you know, maybe take your time to look at this chart, pause the video, see if you can find something that you might want to sort of use in your own analysis. I only like to try point things out and say what I think and what I might do. I don't ever recommend you guys follow that in case you lose money. I would hate to be responsible for people losing money. That does just about wrap it up though, guys. If you liked the content, please consider liking. Comment down below if you think I missed anything. If you think Filecoin will sort of rally up during this time, I'm leaning against it, but I can always be wrong. We might even see just another leg up and then a collapse down. I'm not saying that it has to operate within this range. I'm just saying it is likely because it has played out in a very similar way leading up to this point. But again, it's crypto. Anything can happen. We could see a dip below and we could come back to this deep value range. Literally anything can happen. All I know is that if Filecoin does come back to $2.60, anything below $3 basically, I'll be very happy to pick some up. And I might even consider moving my Bitcoin into a little bit of Filecoin at this point, because we do see that around this time, Filecoin does do well on its Bitcoin pair. So it might be worth moving some of your Bitcoin into Filecoin instead of your US dollar. Again, kind of something you have to decide, something you might want to look at. I just want to sort of pick your brains a little bit and put some ideas in your mind that you might want to explore yourself. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. If you liked the video, please like, comment down below what you thought, and please consider subscribing. We're very close to 1,000, so if you guys want to help me and get me to there, that would be greatly appreciated. Thanks so much, guys. Take care and peace.